네. 미덥 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 자리에 앉아주시고요. 네, 이번에는 좀 미덥이 약간 색다르게 진행이 될 예정이에요. 뭐 계속 한국어로 하긴 했지만 오늘은 좀 이제 발표는 영어로 하게 될 것 같은데 소개랑 이런 건 한국어로 하도록 하겠습니다. 네, 그래서 오늘은 이제 저희 이제 한국 블록체인 위크랑 이제 크립토서울이랑 같이 이제 콜라보로 미드업을 하게 되었고 하면서 이제 지미송 그리고 프로그램 비트코인이라는 책을 쓴 작가님이자 이제 프로그램도 하시는 개발자 모시고 이제 그 이야기를 들어보려고 합니다. 그래서 간단히 했던 것처럼 좀 소개드리고 시작하도록 할게요. 그래서 미드업은 잘 아시는 것처럼 이제 이즈데브라는 카카오톡에서 좀 시작하면서 만들어 갔고요. 시간 되시는 분들은 이제 카톡이나 이제 오른쪽 아래 디스코드 들어오시면 저희 이제 미덥 디스코드 서버도 확인할 수 있습니다. 네, 그래서 이제 원래 이제 미덥 목적은 이제 한국어를 쓰는 이제 블록체인 개발자들과 함께 이렇게 네트워킹할 수 있는 시간을 만들어 보려고 하고 있고요. 이제 운영진들이 조금 이제 생기고 있어요. 그래서 약간 좀 더 크게 만들어 가려고 노력하고 있어서 혹시 같이 운영하고 싶으신 분 계시면 편하게 얘기해 주시면 좀 더 다양한 시각으로 만들어 갈 수 있을 것 같습니다. 줌이랑 같이 진행하기 때문에 혹시 질문 같은 거 있으시면 손 들어주시면 저희가 마이크를 드리도록 할게요. 마이크 들고 말씀해 주시면 될 것 같습니다. 네, 그래서 같이 이번에 미드업을 진행하게 된 크립토서울 소개도 좀 드려보려고 해요. 잠시만요. 제가 화면 공유 다시 하겠습니다. 네, 박수로 맞아주세요.
네, 안녕하세요. 저는 크립토서울 대표 강현정이라고 합니다. 영어로는 에리카 강이라고 하고, 네, 이렇게 뭔가 크게 뭔가 만들 생각이 없었는데, 네, 일단 인사드립니다. 네, 저는 지금 2017년부터 이제 크립토 쪽에 있었고, 커뮤니티 빌딩을 지속적으로 하고 있고요. 그래서 크립토서울이라는 그런 커뮤니티를 이제 국내에서 시작해서 지금 베트남이나 타 아시아 국가들 뭐 다양하게 활동을 하고 있어요. 그래서 다양한 프로젝트들을 도와주고 있고, 네, 지미도 이제 그런 인연으로 만나게 되었고, 네, 아무튼 그렇습니다. 그래서 지금 다양한 컨퍼런스, 미트업 뭐 행사들을 많이 열고 있고, 네, 로고들은 뭐 제가 간단하게 저희가 뭘 하는지는 그냥 이제 설명을 드리고, 이제 미트업도 사실 크립토서울 미트업은 지금 2018년 초부터 한 30회 이상 진행해 왔었어요. 그래서 제가 요즘에는 비들 아시아 컨퍼런스를 준비하느라고 미트업을 많이 소홀했던 것 같은데 이번 계기로 다시 한번 하게 되어서 너무 기분이 좋습니다. 그리고 지금 콜린 여기 안에 계시네요. 여기 사진 안에 계시는데 네, 다양한 테마로 미트업을 열기도 하고 지금 여성의 참여도도 이제 늘리려고 노력을 많이 하고 있고 다양한 기업들과 그다음에 이제 학자들 등등과의 콜라보레이션 많이 했었기 때문에 좀 다양하게 진행하고 있고요. 해외에서도 행사를 많이 열고 있어요. 그래서 뭐 최근에 덴버에서 열었었고, 그다음에 이번에 오스틴에서도 열고, 리스본에서도 열고 해서 등등등 해외를 가면서 크립토서울의 정신과 철학을 좀 알리려고 노력을 하고 있고, 또 저와 친한 프로젝트들과 같이 콜라보레이션을 하면서 좀 좋은 분위기와 좀 배움의 장을 만들어 가고 있습니다. 그래서 여기 아래 보시면 이제 베트남에서도 행사를 좀 크게 했었는데 올해도 2회째로 진행을 할 거고요. 그리고 이제 비들 아시아 컨퍼런스는 이제 아마 6월에 좀 있으면 말씀드릴 텐데 이제 진행을 하게 되고 해커톤도 열고 있기 때문에 학생 개발자 참여도를 많이 지향을 하고 있습니다. 그리고 온라인으로도 제가 활동하고 있고 그래서 뭐 지금은 사실 이제 코로나가 조금 이제 없어져서 네, 좀 덜하고 있지만 그때는 엄청 활발하게 크립토서울 유튜브 채널도 활용을 해서 인터뷰도 많이 진행을 했었어요. 끝났네요. 네. 어디 갔지? 네, 제가 네. 제가 6월에 행사가 있거든요. 그래서 간단하게 소개를 해드리려고 했는데, 화면이 많군요. 괜찮아요. 네. 네, 제가 6월에 행사가 있어요. 그래서 그 비들 아시아 행사가 있고 비드 서울도 있고 그다음에 비들 베트남까지 제가 연달아서 진행을 하는데요. 혹시 베트남 관심 많으신 분들 계시면 호치민에서 재밌게 행사를 할 예정입니다. 네, 여기 있네요. 네, 지금 행사가 지금 주르륵 연결이 되는데 저희 유니콘이 메인 캐릭터인 거는 아시죠? 네, 그래서 이드 서울부터 시작해서 이제 비들 아시아 4번째 진행을 하고 비들 베트남까지 2회차 하고 있습니다. 그래서 6월에 많이 참여 부탁드리고 아마 다양한 프로젝트들을 좀 소개를 하고 같이 이제 네트워킹도 할 수 있는 장을 만들 거고요. 오늘도 앰베서더 분들도 오셨어요. 그래서 네, 인사들 많이 하시고 네, 행사에 대한 정보 많이 얻어가세요. 어쨌든 저는 여기서 소개 마치고요. 그래서 지금 지미 같은 경우는 제가 좀 개인적으로 친한 친구이기도 하고 이제 2018년, 2018년부터 알기 시작해서 사실 국내에서 미더블 제가 같이 했었어요. 처음에 이제 그때 한번 초반에 했는데 그때 책 사인회를 같이 진행했었거든요. 논스에서. 그래서 그때 좀 좋았던 기억이 있어서 이번에 한국 온다고 했을 때 제가 이제 무조건 해야 된다. 이번에 다시 한번 같이 하자. 그래서 이제 초대를 힘들게 정말 바쁘신 시간에 초대를 하게 되었습니다. 그래서 네, 일단 지미 오실 때 뜨거운 박수로 인사를 부탁드리고 네, 감사합니다.
그리고 저희가 또 지미가 지으신 책 이렇게 한국어판이에요. 준비했거든요. 이따가 질문을 좋은 걸 해주시면 지미가 셀렉션 해가지고 드릴 예정입니다. 네. 관심 갖고 또 들어주시고 또 좋은 질문 해주시기 바랄게요. 네, 박수로 그럼.
안녕하세요. 한국말 쓰면은 얼마나 좋을까? Unfortunately, I immigrated when I was 8 years old, so I speak like a second grader. And the problem with my using Korean is that when you speak back, I can't understand what you're saying. That's the problem. So don't let my accent fool you. I know I have a good accent, but I can't. I can't really. I really wish that I could speak more Korean and better, but yeah, that would take me a couple of years. So anyway, I thank you guys for having me here. And you know, I had this opportunity to come to Korea as part of my world tour and visiting various places, and it's been a lot of fun. I don't know if there's an echo here or for some reason, but I'm gonna turn off the. So I'm just muting it. But anyway, the topic of this talk is Fiat Ruins Everything, and this also happens to be the book that I've been in the middle of writing for the last year. So I literally submitted the manuscript to the editors yesterday. So they now have it and will edit it and I don't know, chop it up or something. But I will be, you know, getting this out in, I think if everything goes to plan, it'll be out in English in September. So, you know, that's what this talk is about, how fiat ruins everything. So, you know, I realize that many of you in here are probably not Bitcoin maximalists like I am. And maybe some of you dabble in shitcoins and stuff like that. That's okay. I'm here to talk about fiat money and how it ruins a lot of things. Because in a sense, the most important part of getting Bitcoin is understanding money. And in order to understand money, you need to understand what the current system is like. It's actually pretty terrible. So that's the title of my talk, Fiat Ruins Everything. So to sum up why fiat money is just so terrible, you know, I'm going to put up 3 things for you. First is cronyism. Cronyism is this idea that, you know, somebody that is like related to you or your friend gets the benefits and not the people that have earned it, that are most appropriate to the particular task at hand. There's also a lot of corruption. There's a lot of bribery. There's a lot of things going on where, you know, not everything is done for the interests of the public, but for the few people that get access to this money. And finally, there's something called Cantillon effects, and this is the reason for the first two. Cantillon, Richard Cantillon was an English economist or Irish-French economist from the early 1700s, and he he noticed with the first central bank in the modern era, which was the Bank of England, that the people that got to spend the money first got all of the benefits at the expense of everybody that spends it last. This is what the Cantillon effect is. So, we'll get to some of the obvious things later, but if you are a central bank and you get to spend the money first, you get a lot of benefits, whereas the people that get to spend it last don't, right? This is why there's so much wealth in America, because they get to print the money, right? They're printing the money, so they get to do a lot of things. Now, this may sound all good for the US, but as I'll explain later, it's not. It actually exports a lot of manufacturing, for example. Over the last 50 years, every industry has literally left America and gone to other countries, vast majority of which right now is in China. Anyway, the reason why fiat money is so evil is because it brings politics into the picture. And this is not a pleasant thing. And many of you probably have some disgust at politics. Korean politics can be just as vicious and nasty as pretty much everywhere else in the world. But this is probably the thing that you're noticing about nearly everything. Everything gets political, and under fiat money, that's just how it is. And the reason for that is because of the incentives, and there are a lot of different incentives at play. The reason why people do certain things. But the main sort of incentives that change are you get a giant distortion of prices. So the people that get to print the money spend it first, and whatever they demand, there's going to be more of that made rather than other things. So the United States, for example, they spend a lot of money on weapons and, fighter jets and things like that. A lot of things that they want to spend money on, those things are the prices of those things are going to be distorted. In particular, anything related to banking, those people all get to print money to some degree, and they get to choose essentially the winners versus the losers. And we'll get to more of that in a little bit as well. There's generally a decreased quality for subsidized products. So there's a lot of politics that goes into this, but at least in the United States, you have student loan programs, which means that college is subsidized. And if college is subsidized, then the quality decreases. And you can tell if you look at, for example, a university entrance exam from 1920 and compare to like the SATs now, like even like an 8th grade test from 1920 is like enormously difficult for a college graduate to answer, right? It's stuff like, what are the capitals of all of the states that touch the Ohio River? That's not something that you're necessarily going to know. And it's, people have become, I guess, a lot dumber, or this has the quality of this education has significantly decreased because of the subsidization. And of course, education's not the only one. There's a lot of other things that have decreased in quality because the government subsidizes them, because there's a fiat money printer that distorts prices. And of course, that leads to the third thing, and these are rent-seeking opportunities. Now, if you don't know what rent-seeking is, it's basically this idea that you sit in the middle of some useful transaction. So say somebody is buying something from somebody else. If you are the government, you can sit in the middle and tax this transaction, right? You can collect a fee, right? A value-added tax or something like that. And that is a rent-seeking opportunity. You're not adding anything to the transaction, but you are benefiting from it. And this is all over the economy. There are entire departments of people that are rent seeking. So the typical one that we think of is the government bureaucrat, right? Rubber stamps some, permit of some kind. They're not party to the transaction. They maybe the person already bought the property and they want to do something with it, but there's some permitting process that it needs to go through. It's a fee. They collect rent. They get paid for doing essentially nothing, right? Giving permission, essentially. And there's a lot of those in the economy today, and that's a result of fiat money. And rent seeking is evil. It's really, really terrible for all of civilization because these are people that are not contributing anything to anyone. I want to show you this chart of the growth of physicians and administrators, and this is in the US healthcare system. I know that Korea has a very different one, single payer, all that. This is the United States. And as you can see, the graph starts at 1970, and I will note for you that in 1971, Richard Nixon ended the gold-backed dollar, and it has since been a pure fiat currency. But this is the growth of healthcare in the United States. You can see that in the brown are the physicians. These are the actual doctors. These are the nurses. These are the people that do the actual medicine. And the yellow are the administrators. These are the paper pushers. These are the people that fill out forms, that send a request to get paid from an insurance company, the people that make sure that all of the doctor's visit is properly documented for your ICD-9 code, right? This is a really, really bloated administrative industrial complex as a result of something that happened. And that something that happened was regulation. It was a lot of rent-seeking opportunities that were brought up. And every time they change a law or something like that, there's a lot more administrators that come online. And this is just one example. I'm just giving you one of healthcare. You look at universities, like number of professors versus number of administrators, same graph, right? You look at the Department of Defense, number of soldiers versus number of administrators, same graph. It happens to every single sort of fiat-induced growth, is that you end up with a lot of paper pushers, a lot of busybodies, a lot of people that don't really add anything. And this is really, really bad because those people get appointed by politics, right? The people that get these positions, the people that end up in these positions where they can, approve something, essentially give permission, well, that's done by politics. And this is very, very unfair because oftentimes these positions pay quite a bit of money, right? And if you are getting paid a lot of money for essentially doing nothing, you're extracting value from everybody else. And the prototypical example of a rent seeker is this guy. Now, I don't know how many of you know who he is, but this is Hunter Biden. This is President Joe Biden's son. He had this laptop that had some really, really bad stuff on it that was kind of suppressed by the US media. But he is the prototypical example of a rent seeker. He is somehow he has no discernible skills whatsoever. He's not an expert in anything, but he is somehow on the board of a Ukrainian energy company. He is also an advisor to various Chinese companies. How did he get these positions? Think about it. It's because he's the president's son. That is the only reason he has these. In fact, the only things he seems to be good at are doing cocaine and filming with underage girls. That's really all he knows how to do. Yet this is what rent seeking leads to, is a lot of leeches like this that don't add anything to society, that are actually actively extracting value from everybody else. So rent seeking has a lot of really detrimental effects. The first of which is that it drains a lot of talent. Probably the biggest rent-seeking industry out there is investment banking. And if you think about it, in the last 50 years, what have the best and the brightest people in the best places, right? Like if you graduate from Harvard, if you graduate from Stanford, if you graduate from MIT, where do you go? You go into investment banking. Why? Not because they have such a passion for investment banking. Okay, I see very few little kids that are like, you know, when I grow up, I want to be an investment banker. I want to trade derivatives on 50x leverage on an FTX. Like, you know, that's not what they say, right? No, they go into it because it makes a tremendous amount of money for doing relatively little amounts of work. It drains talent. These are the people that 50 years ago would have been working at NASA, trying to, you know, make a spaceship to Mars or something, you know, building a new type of energy, nuclear power plant, something like that. Instead, these people are going into investment banking, or, you know, to put it a little more closer to home for me, at least, they're trying to get yet another click so they can make a few more cents, right? I mean, think about that. This is where rent seeking leads, is that it drains talent from all of these useful things to all these useless things. And that's a big problem, because the most productive people become the biggest leeches. Instead of people that are creating new ways to utilize nuclear power, you're getting people that are rent seeking, that are investment bankers, that are doing some scam. So instead of them adding to society, you have them tremendously subtracting from society, okay? It's, in a sense, this is kind of like a cheat code to civilization, right? Like if you can become a rent seeker, you don't have to work hard at all. You just get into that position and you stay there for the rest of your life. This is what people are seeking to do. And what's even worse, a lot of these positions are highly esteemed. People think of you as like some great person if you manage to get one of these rent-seeking positions. This is what people seek out. This is what they study for. This is what their dream is, to become a, you know, have passive income for the rest of your life, you know, extracting value from other people that are actually doing stuff. That's terrible. And civilization, as a result, gets screwed. Civilization gets screwed. Why? Because all of these productive people are now subtracting from civilization. So we start going backwards. We start regressing. And really, that regression is related to this idea that you're ruining merit. When you have a lot of rent seeking, the people that get into any leadership position tend not to be the people that deserve it. It's the people that play politics very well. And it ruins this idea of merit. In a free market, the best products, the ones that you know, provide the best services, that are faster, cheaper, better in some way, those are the things that win. But when you add rent seeking to the picture, it's no longer the case. That ruins civilization. So here are the actual fiat mechanics. Political connectedness is more valued than the value provided, right? Who you know and who you can get on the good side of matters more than the products you make, than the effort that you put in. And we all kind of know this is true, right? We all know that one person that's maybe comes from a rich family or something like that. They're not that smart, but somehow they end up like Hunter Biden. Well, maybe not that bad, but you know, you get the idea. But the person that works really hard, 80-hour weeks, they're providing a lot of value. They kind of get screwed, right? They don't capture a lot of the value because there are too many Hunter Bidens. There's also a lot of gatekeeping in a lot of these rent-seeking positions. A lot of people want to get into these rent-seeking positions. It's in many ways seen as the ultimate in employment, right? Get a rent-seeking position, you get passive income somehow, you don't do very much, and you make lots of money. That's what people aspire to. So in order to make sure that not everyone gets through, there's only so much room up there. There's a lot of gatekeeping. There's people that sort of try to make sure that you can't get in. And if you know about any of these industries where there's a lot of politics and stuff like that. That's kind of how it is. And that means that it requires either extraordinary luck or personal connections, right? The reason Hunter Biden got all of those positions is because his father is the president. And before that, his father was a very powerful senator. It's either that or you have to be extraordinarily lucky. You have to get picked, just be in the right place at the right time. And this is really bad because it causes a lot of envy. It stokes a lot of resentment. And they kind of deserve it, don't they? Like, they haven't done anything to get there. They didn't earn it. It's because of this very unfairness. And once you're in, it becomes sort of like this really shady political game. It's about sort of climbing the ladder. And if you've noticed, a lot of CEOs of companies, they're more or less political officers at this point, aren't they? Right? They're very good at extracting value out of government, making friends with the right people, and they know how to sort of backstab others and like make themselves look good so they get to the top. That's sort of what's required now. It's not about merit at all. It's not about ability at all. It becomes this very nasty political game. And that increased gatekeeping you can see in some of these industries. I already mentioned investment banking. If you have friends that are investment banking, you know that they were either really, really, really smart and like pursued this thing like a dog, or they happen to know like the vice president of Goldman Sachs or something, right? And they got in because of personal connections. Similar thing in Hollywood. It is extremely difficult to get one of those parts unless you happen to be the son or daughter of a famous director or actor or something, in which case you have a very easy path. Modern art, right? To get to the top of the modern art heap, you need to like stroke the right egos and get the right people saying the right things about you. There are lots of talented artists that don't make anywhere near to the top because it's gatekept, right? It's politics, it's fiat. Even unions are not, exempt from this. A lot of electricians unions and stuff like that. They require a large amount of luck or personal connections to get into, believe it or not. And everyone in the U.S. at least complains about the lack of electricians or welders or plumbers, but they're gatekept as well. And politics. I'm talking about the actual people in politics, right? The people in those positions, at least in the United States, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, what do they have in common? They're like 85 years old, right? They're really, really old. Once you're in, you don't ever leave. Why? Because you don't need any skill. If you lose your fastball, it doesn't matter, right? You can be halfway senile. It doesn't seem to matter. A bunch of them apparently take Alzheimer's meds. It does not matter. The thing that matters is that you have that connection and that you are already in that powerful position. And they all trend older, right? All of these industries where when there's fiat rent-seeking opportunities, you stay in those positions forever. How many of you know a postdoc that's been doing it for like more than 8 years, right? You probably know a bunch of them, right? It used to be that you get your PhD and you go to a tenure track position. Now there's just none of those people at the top want to retire. So what happens? You just extend the runway a little bit, and you have to go do all of this stuff. And if you're younger, you kind of know that the game is kind of rigged against you, right? They're just going to make it harder and harder and harder for you to make it to a reasonable position. This is what increased gatekeeping has done. This is what rent seeking does, is that it's so profitable, so great for the people at the top that they really don't let many people in. Rent seeking and fiat money also like create a lot of top-down mandates, right? Essentially, the people at the top get to determine pace for everybody else. And you can see this a lot in modern art and so on, where the people at the top decide, hey, this is the new thing now, right? They're in control. They get to say that. And they also get to tell you what to value. They get to tell you, hey, like these are the people that you should support, or these are the causes that you should support, and basically tell you how to think. And they get to tell you what the truth is. Apparently, the science is settled or something, right? They tell you what to believe, and you don't get to verify anything yourself. Now, I've been traveling for the last 7.5 months, and one of the places that I got to go is Rome. And this, for me, is one of the most beautiful pieces of art that has ever been created. And if you don't know what it is, this is La Pietà by Michelangelo. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about this statue, because Michelangelo created the statue when he was in his early 20s, and he worked on it for a few years, and this was just absolutely sublime. He created this statue, and it's also unique because it is the only one that he ever signed. And you can see it on Mary's sash in the middle, and you can see that it says Michelangelo. It's the only one that he signed, and he always regretted it. Now, the reason why he signed this statue was because he realized some people were talking about his statue, and he overheard them. And they were saying, oh, who made this statue? And they were wondering, and they were speculating on who it might be. But none of it was Michelangelo. And he got angry. And that night, he went in and carved his name on Mary's sash. That's the story. Now, why did he regret it? Well, he regretted he didn't sign anything for the rest of his life. The Sistine Chapel, David, none of it has his signature. Why did he not do it? Well, he didn't do it because he wanted the work to speak for itself. He wanted the work to speak for itself. And if you go to the Vatican, you see many statues like this. Beautiful statues, absolutely wonderful looking, amazing statues, and none of them are signed. Why? Because the work's supposed to speak for itself. It's not supposed to be top down. No one is telling you, hey, you have to appreciate this. I want you to compare it to this thing. Now, I don't know how many of you are fans of Picasso or whatever, but I think this looks gross. I think a 5-year-old can do this. And I like, you can come fight me later if you think this is something interesting. The only reason why this has any value whatsoever, the only reason anyone is willing to hang it up anywhere is because, whoops, of the thing in the middle right here. You see the cursor there? That's his signature. That's the only reason it has any value whatsoever. Pablo Picasso managed to get to the top of the art world. He got there through politics. And at that point, once you're at the top, you can sign anything and people will buy it. I think you guys believe that, right? Like he can sneeze on a piece of paper and sign it and people would buy it. Why? Because the painting is not the value. The work doesn't speak for itself. It is top-down fiat. The value is determined by fiat. It's said to be worth something by some experts, right? That's the difference. That's the difference. La Pietà is merit-based, right? It's so clear that it's beautiful. It's so clear that it is something worthy. This thing, if you saw it without the signature, you'd say, this is trash. What the heck is this? It's a signature that matters because this has become fiatized, right? This is what fiat money does, is it creates this hierarchy where value is determined by the people at the top, and you have to take it whether you like it or not. So here are some fiat companies that I want to talk about. And these, you might have some instinct that these are already fiat companies. Defense contractors, for example. Many of them, like this is something that I found out as I studied this. A lot of the weapons that the Pentagon contracts out to get, like 90% of them don't work. Right? It's always like some fancy weapon that does this, this, or this, and they claim that, okay, like we got this new toy. They try it out in the field, it doesn't work. Like that's how inefficient defense contractors are. Car manufacturers, many of them have become fiat companies. Why? Because they got bailed out. 2008, GM got bailed out by the US government, so did Chrysler. And they've become essentially fiat companies. They are controlled by the government in some way, shape, or form. Airlines, many of them have not progressed at all. And we'll get to some of that in a little bit. But airlines are very fiat. They most national airlines around the world have gone bankrupt at some point, right? British Airways, or I don't know about Korean Air, but a lot of different airlines have just kind of gone bankrupt. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Utilities, right? These are usually government mandated monopolies. They're also fiat companies. And of course, banks. These are the ultimate fiat company in that they really add very little. And there's a lot of rent-seeking positions. There's a reason why there's so many officers at a bank, and they're all rent-seeking. Anyway, the common thing around all of these industries is that they are all extremely political. They end up having this flavor to them where you need to play politics both internally and externally to get ahead, and that's how they sustain themselves. And they ruin merit, right? You get a lot of rent seekers, and you get what I call zombification, right? IBM used to produce all kinds of amazing machines, right? Their very name is International Business Machines, right? They made typewriters, they made computers, they made all this stuff. Most of that is gone now. They're mostly a services company. They sold their last sort of like manufacturing capacity, Lenovo, to a Chinese company. They don't make that anymore. They're a zombie company. They don't do anything, right? They subsist on fiat money given to them by government. I was reading about how many stock buybacks they did. Since 2000, they've done $200 billion in stock buybacks. Their market cap is about 150. What does that tell you, right? Like they've been buying back their shares. This is their way of adding stockholder value. Stagnation. So pretty much every industry that fiat money sort of infects becomes completely stagnant. You really don't see very much innovation whatsoever. Everything just sort of stops where it is. And airlines are actually a very good example of that. And you get ultimately a regression of civilization. And whenever you have wars of destruction, things go back way more. Because of all of that. Now, here's an example of a regression. And I'm sure some of you looking at this are familiar with what it is, but this is the Concorde. This is the Concorde. This was a plane that got you from New York to London in 3 hours. It started running in the early 70s. It stopped running in 2004. This is the last major innovation we've had in commercial air flight. Everything since then has gone downhill. In fact, the transit time from New York to LA in 1969 was faster than it is now. Think about that. We're going backwards. We're going backwards. We are regressing as a civilization because of all this rent seeking. The engineers that could have built something better than the Concorde, they're probably investment bankers now. Or, working on some click thingy at Google, or making a React app for some VC funded company. They're not building stuff. Dishwashers. Now, I'm sure many of you have these at home or whatever. But at least mine at home, I think it's actually an LG branded dishwasher, takes 3 hours. 3 hours. You guys are familiar with this, right? Okay, guess how long a dishwasher took in the 60s? Many of you probably don't know, but it took 40 minutes. And it washed it sparkling clean. What happened? Why does it take 3 hours now? And it was 40 minutes, 60 years ago. What happened? Well, there are a lot of regulations that came in. There's a type of detergent you can use. There's a limited amount of water you can use. Here's a limited amount of electricity you can use. Next thing you know, it takes 3 hours. And you have to be a restaurant with a particular license to get the kind that washes it in 40. We're going backwards. Think about Hollywood. How many Spider-Man movies can you have before, they keep recycling the same. There's not been an original movie in like 20 years, right? This is what happens. We're going backwards. They just want more special effects or something. We don't advance in any way. And you get a lot of these fiat industries, entire industries infected by fiat money and rent seeking. And they don't want competition. They want to stay where they are. So you get this weird kind of conservatism. They literally conserve everything, right? They just want things to stay the same. They like regulatory and compliance costs, especially the large companies, because that means that they're not going to get disrupted by anything new. So, a completely new type of transport, it'll probably get regulated as a car. And if you don't weigh, if your car doesn't weigh enough or has this or that, and it's not going to fly. This is why we haven't had much innovation in that area. There's really no reason to innovate for those people because they're rent seeking. They know that they're going to have buyers. They know they're going to get subsidized. And they keep their positions by default. It becomes like feudalism again, where it gets passed down, except instead of father to son, it's basically just whoever happens to play good political games at each company. This is the last time we probably made some sort of progress as human beings. This is Neil Armstrong when he landed on the moon in 1969. 2 years later, Richard Nixon cut all ties to gold for the dollar. What have we done since then? What have we done since then? Yeah, we have the internet, but it's really just better communication. Better shopping, better ways to share videos, better ways to get entertained. But are we pushing the frontier in any way? I would say no. This is because of this entitlement mindset that fiat money produces, all based on politics and conserving the positions of the people, right? They feel entitled to stay in the positions that they have, right? All these people that are complaining about AI, they're like, oh, I'm going to lose my job. They think they deserve it. And it's based on theft, which is really how they fund all of this stuff. It's through inflation. It's through monetary expansion. It is through stealing from everybody else. And at least in the US, it's not just stealing from people in the US, because as you know, the dollar is a reserve currency for the entire world. So everyone that holds the dollar, from foreign central banks to the orphan in North Korea that uses it as their black market currency, you're really stealing from them. This is the real cost of rent seeking. Thankfully, Bitcoin fixes this. Bitcoin fixes this because it takes out this really pernicious, evil thing called fiat money. It takes out all of those incentives. It makes governments collect taxes to fund their stuff instead of printing money, expanding money. Altcoins don't fix anything. You knew I was going to put this in there, right? They don't fix anything because they're the exact same thing as fiat. You still have a central controller. You have somebody that creates the money. Altcoins don't fix anything. Bitcoin fixes it because it's the only one that's actually decentralized. Now, I want to end with my cowboy hat and tell you why I wear it. Now, a lot of people, ask me about it. When did you start wearing it? Blah, blah, blah. There are three reasons why I wear my cowboy hat. The first is because I'm from the great state of Texas, the great state of Texas. And if you know anybody from Texas, they want you to know that they're from Texas. And I want you to know that I'm from Texas. That's the first reason. The second reason is because of the industry that I work in. It is Bitcoin, and it's a lot like the Wild West, right? A lot of opportunity, but also a lot of danger. A lot of danger. And it's a reminder, be careful out there, right? Be careful out there, but look for the opportunities. And the third reason is because I love that 19th century American era. And that to me is when humanity expanded the most. If you think about it, America went from a backwater British colony to a world superpower in those 100 years. 1800 to 1900, backwater British colony to world superpower. Now, why? The reason is because they pushed the frontier. And there was a saying back in the Old West, it was, go west, young man, go west. Now, what does that mean? Well, at the time, for most of the 19th century, the population of the United States was mostly on the East Coast. So cities like Boston, Philadelphia, New York, Virginia, places like that. That's where all of the population was. And if you became a baker, a cobbler, a lawyer, whatever it is that you did, you would have to compete against the same people that had been doing it for 40 years. So as you started your career, people would tell you, go west, young man, go west. Now, why did they say that? Because the West was where the opportunity was. The West was what was growing. The West was the frontier. And that was where they didn't have that many cobblers or bakers or accountants or lawyers. So if you went out there, you'd find opportunity. You'd find ways to contribute, and you get to blaze your own path. You didn't have to wait 40 years to become the best lawyer in town. You could just go out west and take the bull by the horns. I realize I'm in Korea, and this is probably one of the places where well-trodden paths are taken by so many people. Even stuff like K-pop has a very well-worn path, which is, or playing StarCraft. It's crazy. But that's what I want to remind you, is that there is opportunity elsewhere. And the reason I wear this hat is because Bitcoin is that opportunity. I know a bunch of people, for example, that are new accountants, and they want they want to find a way to distinguish themselves from accountants that have been doing it for 40 years. There's some that figured out all of the rules around Bitcoin accounting. Guess what? They have a lot of customers now. Very rich customers too. There's a guy, Preston Byrne. He came out of a mid-tier law school. He decided fairly early on, hey, I'm going to concentrate on Bitcoin. I'm going to know everything there is about this, and I'm going to be that Bitcoin lawyer. He did. He's one of the most influential lawyers in this industry today. I guess what I'm saying is you don't need all of the credentials. You don't need the approval of the gatekeepers. What you need is to move yourself to the frontier, Go west, young man. Go west. There's opportunity out there for you. You don't need to be stuck in the same thing where you're waiting 40 years to become vice president of marketing. You can do it by going out to the frontier. Go to the opportunity. And that's why we're there. Anyway, let's finish off with the Bitcoin sound money mindset. It is all about providing value. It is progressing civilization, and it is based on merit. This is in sharp contrast to the fiat rent-seeking mindset. And it is above all focused on making sure that the truth wins. And that is why the Bitcoin maximalists are the intransigent minority, and you're never going to get rid of us. Anyway, thank you very much. All right, so I think we have some time for Q&A. Okay, so if you have questions for me, I guess in English or Korean, I'll try to understand it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the speech. I'm really interested in rent seeking because it is rampant in Korea too. But I think the problem is capitalism itself, not only fiat. Why do you concentrate on fiat money? If we replace fiat money with Bitcoin, can we remove the rent seeking while keeping capitalism?
Yeah, so I don't think it's capitalism. I think capitalism or the exchange, free exchange or market-based exchange is a very good thing. And the way I think about it, and the easiest way to think about how capitalism works, is that when two people are trading, I am giving up something and I am getting something, right? Both sides. And they're doing it voluntarily, which means that they find that trade useful to them. So they are increasing in wealth in a sense, right? So if you're a cobbler and you make, 30 shoes or whatever, your third or fourth pair of shoes aren't that valuable to you. But if you sell it, you trade it with somebody and you get bread, for example, well, you're gaining because your third pair of shoes don't matter that much, but the bread is going to feed you. Now that's the case all over the economy, and that's what the division of labor is all about. When everyone is producing something and you do trading, and people and everyone benefits, society grows. It gets better. The problem is that there's so much rent seeking that all of that value, all of that creation, all of that entrepreneurship has essentially been nullified. You have people that are stealing from everyone else. You have stuff like investment banking. You have stuff, to some degree, like a lot of venture capital is like that. People that are extracting value from everybody else without contributing anything in return. And it's done in a way where nobody really understands how it works. So, you get these bankers that are living large and, making hundreds of millions of dollars. They're not really contributing anything, but they're stealing from everybody else. That's a real problem. And if you eliminate fiat money, then you get a real free market. The problem with fiat money is that it distorts the market significantly. The government gets to choose winners and losers. You don't let the people choose. And when that happens, you get lots of bad trades. You get you get stupid stuff that gets funded. You get malinvestment, and that essentially breaks down civilization. It's taking from the base layer of civilization and creating a house of cards.
혹시 다른 분 질문 있으신가요? 한국어로 해주시면 에리카가 저도 조금 해서 번역을 해볼 수도 있을 것 같아서 기술적인 것도 좋고 아닌 것도 좋고.
먼저 발표를 잘 들었습니다. 알트코인을 팔아야 될 것 같아요. 추가적으로 질문 드리면
All right, give this man a book. All right.
그 예시를 들어주신 것 중에 그 발전이 멈췄을 때가 대부분 이제 1970년대 이후라고 보이는데 그때가 이제 닉슨 쇼크가 있었던 그 골드 스탠다드가 폐지됐을 때인 것 같거든요. 그러면은 만약에 이제 뭐 가정이지만 근본이제로 다시 돌아간다던가 아니면은 뭐 비트코인을 기반으로 달러를 발행한다던가 뭐 이런 방식으로 이제 절충할 수 있는 대안이 있을 수도 있지 않을까 생각이 드는데 이제 어떻게 생각하시는지.
I think I understood most of that, but please translate just in case I didn't catch it.
아니 이건 그런 게 아니에요.
비트코인 그 대안을 좀 내달라는 거로.
Yeah, he's asking whether it's going to be backed by gold again or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay. Can you just in case let everyone hear?
맞아.
Okay, all right. So obviously in the Nixon shock, you took the dollar was no longer backed by gold. He actually just said he would temporarily suspend the convertibility to gold. So at the time, other central banks could convert their dollars to gold at $35 an ounce. But because France was threatening to convert a lot of their dollars for gold, he realized that there was so much gold flowing out of the country that it would become very painful for the United States. They would lose essentially all of their gold. So I think your question is, how do you can you go back to a gold standard, or can you back currency by something else? Maybe it's even backed by Bitcoin, something like that. Yeah. The answer, I think, is no. I don't think that's going to happen. Although, like at least with the dollar, there is some possibility. For example, that the BRICS nations, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and many others, that they would maybe introduce something that was gold-backed that would be convertible to compete with the US dollar. And they kind of need it, right? Because most of those countries are known as very authoritarian countries. And essentially, to put it in altcoin terms, you'd be afraid of getting rugged by those people. So if they back it with gold and convert it on a regular basis, then maybe that could work. So maybe a competing currency would do that. I don't see the US dollar as needing to do that. So there's not enough incentive there for them to go and do that. I mean, there are people in Congress that I know that are very much willing to go down that road. There's not any votes for it or anything. And libertarians in the United States have been like calling for that forever. I think the way that this plays out is that you probably will get some sort of bipolar currency world. Right now, the dollar is dominant. And if you've been paying attention the last few weeks, there's a lot of countries that are starting to look at other currencies for settlement. So Saudi Arabia, for example, announced that they would maybe settle in the yuan, I guess, or whatever CBDC they make or whatever. But there's some sort of like bifurcation of the world, and we've had a monopolar world for a while with the dollar. I think since the fall of the Soviet Union, we're now sort of seeing BRICS emerge as sort of like a second pole in this global order. So it's possible that they do it. The important thing, though, isn't necessarily nations. They're all overspending. They're all, they've gotten used to doing this and extracting things from people. The only sort of end to fiat money is hyperinflation or, complete currency devaluation or something like that. And if you know people from South America, for example, like this happens on a regular basis. I think the last time it happened in Korea, it was maybe in the 70s with the won inflation, something like that. But it does happen. And, I guess you can go talk to your grandparents about it, see what that was like. But hyperinflation essentially extracts all value from other people, and hard assets tend to go up very fast and so on. What I expect to happen is that there will be maybe a country that does maybe go on a Bitcoin standard, like one at a time, and just says, okay, this is legal tender here, something like that. And the citizens use that as their sort of store of value. El Salvador, for example, is doing that. I've been there a couple of times. A lot of other countries, I think what will happen with them is they will experience hyperinflation, and when you get hyperinflation, everyone just moves to the dollar. And I've seen this in various countries that I've been in. I've been in Argentina, I've been in Lebanon. What happens is just people start using the dollar instead. And like there's no credit available. It wreaks havoc in an economy, but that's the direction things go. It doesn't suddenly get backed by gold or something like that. I don't think there's sort of like undoing that. The problem with gold also is that it tends to centralize. It's a physical commodity, right? So you have to carry it around, or you have to trust the bank. And once you introduce trust, you get fiat all over again, because you trust somebody to do something. Well, that's how fiat became fiat. It was all of them. Gold was in one place. People traded bills, and then FDR said, all right, well, you're not allowed to own gold anymore, and we're going to revalue these dollars to be lower. And he stole a bunch of money from a bunch of people. That's how things sort of end up. So I don't think you can go back to gold. I think individuals have to go back to Bitcoin, and ultimately that's where it leads, because it's the soundest money, and people are going to want the soundest money. They're going to want the money that isn't debasable by everyone else. And once you start doing that, then there's nothing that can really, I mean, I think Safety says that the best thing governments can do is to have it backed by gold again, but he doesn't expect that to happen. They're just way too far down this road. They're too used to having all of these, basically being able to steal at will from their people. Hope that answers your question. Also, you get a book.
Hi, Jimmy. Thanks for flying all the way out here to give your talk. I have two things. One is, so I didn't understand why the banana Art Basel sold for that much until I understood Marcel Duchamp's toilet, where he actually signed as a pen name. He was on board of that art organization, but he signed as a pen name. And he put the toilet out there, a lot of controversy. And then they're saying, what is this? This is not art. And then there was someone from the Swiss art world that said, no, this is art. This is art because it is challenging the notion of what art is. And so once I understood that, I understood the banana. And I just share that story because this question is very self-serving. Who are the best two NFT lawyers a Korean American female art work with?
Well, I think NFTs are dumb, but that's me. And I like this is the thing. You can make any justification for anything, but if the toilet doesn't speak for itself, then you've kind of done a bad job as an artist, haven't you? Like if it doesn't speak for itself, if the meaning is not obvious, then you failed as an artist. Your job as an artist is to communicate some greater truth. If you're not communicating it, and if somebody needs to explain it to you, it's kind of like having to explain a joke. You failed. You failed in what you're supposed to do. So kind of reject this notion that it has some deeper meaning just because somebody said so. That is the epitome of fiat thinking, is that some art expert needs to explain to you why you heathen need to appreciate this art because you're not sophisticated enough. No, that's just elitist, snobby WEF crap. It's I reject that sort of expertise or whatever. I get to decide what I think is beautiful. Thank you very much. You don't get to tell me that a banana taped to a wall is worth $100,000 just because some hoity-toity ivory tower art critic says so. I completely reject that. As far as a lawyer to work with, I really have no idea. I don't even live here, so I wouldn't know. But I will say that I don't think like you've seen the crash in NFTs. I don't think that's ending anytime soon. I think it continues to crash, but that's my opinion. You know, take it for what it is. But thank you for your question. There were a couple of others. Yeah.
Sure. Hey, Jimmy. So I'm definitely with you on Bitcoin. I've been sort of a Bitcoin person since 2010 as well too. That's all I've been in. So we know your stance on, you know, altcoins. What's one reason, just one, that you're really against alts?
The one reason?
Yeah.
Because they're fraudulent. You're printing your own money. This is why we call fiat money fraudulent, right? Yeah. And if you are the creator of an altcoin, you print a bunch of altcoins. It's completely normal now to make a 70% pre-mine, keep it for yourself, and somehow that's okay. To me, morally, that is disgusting.
And then stable coins then?
Stable coins. All right. So this is going to get a little technical, but I think DigiCash, like it's a very, very poor form of DigiCash. Now, if you don't know what DigiCash is, it was something that David Chaum invented in like 1981, like 5 years after public key cryptography. But the basic idea is that you have a central party that issues these this thing called eCash. You can pass it around as much as you want, and then when the bank gets it back, it has no idea what middle steps it took. It only knows the person that it issued with, and the person that redeemed it, but none of the in-between stuff. So it's completely anonymous bare cash. Now that's what I think stable coins are trying to do, except doing very poorly, because you have all of this stuff on the blockchain. Everyone knows all of the details because it's all public. So in that sense, I think stable coins are just very poor forms of eCash, because you are trusting somebody. At the end of the day, if it's Tether, it's like Tether the company. If it's USDC, it's Circle. It's whatever. You are trusting somebody. If you're going to trust somebody, do it in a way that's actually private. And this is where a lot of the Fedimint stuff, maybe it could be useful. But this notion that stable coins are super useful because whatever, it's just eCash done poorly. I really don't think it's like once. Yeah, it's either that or governments regulate it away anyway. Yeah.
I have two questions. I think it's human nature to want to keep one's wealth and to earn money in easy way, to pay for things that are inefficient. So I don't think the use of Bitcoin can solve everything. For example, El Salvador has set Bitcoin as its legal currency, but it doesn't seem like they are doing well. So my first question is about this. And secondly, I would like to ask how we can get people to use Bitcoin. We can't tell people to use Bitcoin by explaining a philosophy. So is there a realistic way?
Well, first of all, let me tell you about El Salvador, because I've been there two times. First time was in January of last year, and the second time was in June of last year. Everything that you hear in the press, fake news. Fake news. I can tell you that the place in just the 6 months improved dramatically. And this is sort of like at least for me, a case study in what happens when you remove sort of the fiat mentality. Now, El Salvador does not have its own currency. They've been dollarized for a while. They don't have a central bank. And if you are a country like that, what tends to happen is that you rely, instead of relying on your own central bank to expand the currency, you rely on the IMF to give you loans. And what Nayib Bukele did was he rejected the IMF loans. He rejected the IMF loans. Now, this may not seem like a big deal, although I don't know, maybe some of you were around in '98 and remember all that saga. But the IMF gives a lot of conditions on its loans. And the previous 4 administrations of different parties in El Salvador, they all followed the IMF. And among other things, they say you can't, they make you take austerity measures. You can't invest more than 10% of your budget on infrastructure. And if you're a developing country, that's all you want to do. You want roads, you want sewers, you want to make life better for everybody so they can be productive. And they weren't allowed to do that. But by rejecting the IMF, they were able to. And you can very clearly see it. There were all these roads there that weren't there before. There were sewers there that weren't there before. And I've been told in the years since that I've been gone that the entire downtown of San Salvador has completely transformed. Now, the IMF, WEF, and all those people want you to believe that it's like it's still martyr capital or whatever. But actually go there. There's a bunch of Bitcoiners that have, and they can tell you, hey, it's a pretty nice place. And it's actually beautiful. There's a lot of development going on. There's a lot of opportunity. A lot of people that immigrated to the United States, often illegally, are coming back. What does that tell you? They vote with their feet. If they're coming back, generally means something's going right. So that was the first part of the question, which is about fiat money and El Salvador. And I really can't think of a better example of where you take out a lot of the fiat mentality and things happen. A lot of things are happening there, and you can see it develop. And you can't just read the news. You have to actually go there and see or hear from the people on the ground. A lot of them are saying, okay, now these gangs are gone, I can actually start a business. Because they were extorting tons of money from every business. This was why it was so oppressed for so long. These gangs would go around and collect money from these businesses. They couldn't run profitably. So that was the first question, and I apologize, but what was the second?
How we can people to use Bitcoin?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And this is a very tricky question, because I think the paradigm that people have is that you need to transact with it, right? Pay for coffee with it or something like that. And then people will suddenly be enlightened to Bitcoin. My experience, that never works. And I've been in this since 2011. So it's been about 12 years. I haven't ever seen that work. What works is really understanding money. And this is why I'm writing this book. This is why I do this presentation. Because once you understand money and its corrupting effects, then you really get, okay, I need to get into something else, because this system is just so corrupt and so horrible that I need an alternative. That's when people turn to Bitcoin. It's not through, you can make $10 more, selling coffee for Bitcoin for your store. That's not how people come in. People come in because they realize it's better money. And this is part of the reason why, the real Bitcoiners, they hand out Safe Dean's book like candy, because that's the one book that really explains what fiat money is. And why Bitcoin is such a revolution, why it's so unique, why it's so different. And I think that's how you convert people, not through, airdrops or whatever. We've tried all that. There was 2015, we did like an airdrop of $100 worth of Bitcoin to every MIT graduate. Most of them didn't do anything with it or spent it right away for sushi or something. Like they didn't get Bitcoin. It's not about the airdrops. It's not about getting them to buy something. It's really about learning that it's better money, and that's what it takes. And this is why, frankly, I'm here to tell you that this is better money, and that the monetary system that you've been living under is unjust, corrupt, and horrible. Yeah.
Oh, thanks for this fascinating lecture and the vulnerabilities and problems of the of the nowadays structure are undeniable, but and like Bitcoin doesn't have, of course, these like bureaucracy and corruption problems. But I wonder, why? Can you expand on why it's different from these like currencies, and why it's not a kind of Ponzi? Like, why not?
Yeah, why it's not a Ponzi.
Yeah, why is this early because early holders, like I'm afraid, for example, I buy this Bitcoin and these early holders of it are just unloading it like to me.
Well, you always have early adopters on anything, so that's not a problem you can get around. And in a sense, the assumption you're making is that a fair distribution would be an equal amount to every person, and that's just not the case in anything in nature. That never happens. But the question you're asking is, how do we know that it's not a Ponzi scheme? Well, you don't until you study it, right? And this is something that Michael Saylor says, is anyone that spent 100 hours studying Bitcoin comes like they get convinced of Bitcoin. And if you haven't put in your 100 hours really learning what it is and all of the decentralized properties around it and how it's very unique and how it's very, very different than anything we've seen before or anything we've seen since, then you're not really going to get it. If you just rely on media narratives about how this is the cryptocurrency industry and lumping Bitcoin with all, like Dogecoin or something, you're not going to get it because you don't understand that all of these things have a central foundation, right? You have somebody that controls everything. That's a very, very different thing than something with where everybody on the network has the same say, right? Like you need the consensus of the network. It's always soft work. I run my own node. If somebody tries to change the limit from 21 to 22 million, my node will reject it. And so will most other nodes. This is why you can't change anything like that. And why it makes it a very different system than anything that we've had before. It's got strict scarcity. And in economics, that hasn't existed ever.
Yeah. So I agree with you on the point that we don't need to convince people to use Bitcoin or own Bitcoin or hold Bitcoin, but I believe people would choose what's good for them, right? So I guess the best option you have is to educate them and let them choose on their own, and they can own their consequences, right? But I think assuming that Bitcoin is good and fiat is less good because of the old chronism, the system, the politics, the vested interest of those who are in the circle. But I personally think fiat is all that bad because of the checks and balances. Like, for example, in the recent SVB example, right? Bank was super aggressive, trying to make money. And, there were some bystanders who were potentially impacted by that. And the government stepped in to solve the problem, right? So, I don't think it's all black and white, right, at the moment.
Yeah. And I'll even go further. We have something called Pax Americana, which is largely done on the dollar hegemony, right? Like the reason why we've had peace, mostly throughout the world, right? I mean, you have skirmishes here and there, is because of the mightiness of the dollar and how it's the global settlement currency. And you've had tremendous amount of global trade because of fiat money and because of its ability to be more or less instantly transported in sort of a digital system through banking. You have the ability to trade all over the world. This is why Samsung products are all over the world. This is why K-pop is all over the world and so on. Like the ability to do that, yes, is a good thing.
Right. So,
but that's you have to take the good with the bad, right? Like
Sure.
and the bad is regressing civilization, and that is something that you can't deny. Like there's so much evil going backwards. Like think about energy, for example. And we're seeing blackouts in places that never used to have them. What happened? Well, the grid is getting worse because all of these countries are turning off their nuclear reactors. we're going, and the nuclear reactors themselves, they're based on a design from the 70s. We haven't progressed at all in nuclear since the 70s, right? And think about it, like nuclear energy is enormously powerful. There are submarines that run entirely on nuclear energy. They don't have to refuel for a year and a half. Now imagine if that sort of like this thing has like enormous amounts of energy for a small amount of space. Imagine if you had that for your car. You would never need to refuel for like a year and a half, or probably way longer than that. Think about that. Why haven't we progressed that way? And if you read science fiction from the 50s and 60s, this is what they were all talking about. But we haven't. Why? Because fiat ossifies everything. It turns every company into zombies. It eliminates any sort of it eliminates a lot of innovation. And that is the thing that we need to think about. And this, like, frankly, this is how Rome fell. This is the decline of civilization.
Right. So I think that negative view on nuclear energy, I think a lot of single point can go to media and all the, oil rich insiders, managing the media to paint a bad picture for nuclear as opposed to the, old energy.
Yeah,
So
and
anyway,
it's the people at the top that do it, right? The fiat,
it's the inner circle.
tastemakers, the elites. They tell us what to believe, and we sort of vote for these regulations that hamper our progress.
Right. So I'll just, before we go off tangent anymore, I'll just get direct to my question. So I believe that Bitcoin solves a lot of the issues that we have in the fiat system. But I think me as an individual, I think one problem I have is that the fluctuation in price is just not bearable. Let's say if you were holding a lot of your assets in crypto, right? Although I would say that a lot of money that I had fiat that go into crypto doesn't come back. It's always just sitting there, or either I lose that, or either I'm just managing that in crypto world. But unfortunately, I live in a fiat world, right? So the question I have for you is that, so how do you manage your money?
Well, so I feel bad for you because most of your crypto has probably gone down 90% and hasn't ever recovered. If you're in Bitcoin, however, over any 5-year period, it's always gone up. So you keep your long-term savings in Bitcoin and keep some amount of fiat to live day to day. But over like any 5-year period in Bitcoin's history, it's always gone up, and you're not going to lose money. And this is what like living on a Bitcoin standard is kind of like. The volatility will always be there. That's true for any commodity. You can look at oil or gold or anything else. If you don't have a central manager that manages the price, like with the central bank of a particular country where they keep it in a peg range or something like that, you're always going to have volatility. But this is the wonderful thing, is that there's no, what people want is an impossibility, which is an asset that goes up steadily and never experiences a crash. Such an asset doesn't exist. And if it did exist, it would get, ARB down to zero, basically. Risk and volatility, or the reward and volatility, are two sides of the same coin. You have to take one with the other. Now, going 100% for you might not work because you don't have the stomach for it, especially on a local level. But this is why we say Bitcoin is a great savings technology. You keep it for your long-term savings. If you're going, and this is what I tell people when they want to get into Bitcoin. You're going to sell it in 6 months when it doubles or halves, don't bother. If you're going to keep it for 5 years or longer, then great. Like any time is a great time to buy. And I would tell you to probably dollar cost average or something like that, so you built up a stack. But you have to think of it as something like, you can't get emotionally attached to that stuff. Any investor will tell you that's the wrong mentality. You have to sort of think about it in a very different way, as a savings vehicle for the future. And as you need it, convert back. That would be my recommendation. no challenge.
Hi, Jimmy. I just graduated school with computer science degree 2 months ago, and I don't have any job yet. So what can I do in the Wild West with my tiny little pick and shovel?
Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you a book, because this book basically is for people like you who already know programming, and it teaches you how to program Bitcoin step by step, lesson by lesson. It'll take you maybe a couple of months to get through it all. There are exercises, go do them, go through all of it. Now, question is, well, how do I get a job and stuff like that? That's a very practical question. And I have some thoughts on that, having been a developer for a very long time. First, you got to put yourself out there. So go look at some open source projects. There's a lot of them. And I know that's not the culture here in Korea to, donate your time for free to something that other people are using for free. But I'm going to tell you that as a developer, you will become a much better developer working on an open source project. There's a lot of them. There's not just Bitcoin Core, but there's Bitcoin J and Electrum and Samurai and many other projects that will gladly take your effort. That's a way to build up a portfolio. And that's what you need if you want to get a job. Remember, if you're looking for a job, you want to reduce the risk for the employer to hire you. And the way you reduce risk is by showing them that you can do what they want you to do. And if you do that for an open source project, get some commits and stuff like that, well, oftentimes what a lot of these companies do is they look through the open source contributor lists to see who they can pick off for their company. You're already going to have a reputation. You'll be ahead of 95% of the people that are in your position, and you'll have something. Now, I'm not going to say this is going to be easy. In fact, it's very hard to go and contribute to an open source project. You have to go and learn all of the code underneath. You have to figure out how it all works. And here's another sort of tip for you. Go to meetups, go to conferences, go meet some people. I used to be a sales engineer. And one of the things that I learned as a sales engineer is that you never get the sale the first time you meet someone. In fact, if you're in sales, you know that you have to meet someone 7 or 8 times before you get the sale. You have to think that way as a potential employee. You have to make contact with these people 7 or 8 times. And that means going and seeing them, talking to them, making them remember you, and showing your value. If you provide value to these people, they will hire you. It's just a matter of time. But you have to put in the work. You have to go and do all of that stuff. And if you learn Bitcoin, you're going to be way ahead of the game. I literally have students in almost every major Bitcoin company in the United States, and they know that it's fairly rare to see somebody that's gone through the book on their own. In fact, that's actually one of the best indicators of a very successful employee. They've done studies on this where they measured what college you graduated from, right? Like Harvard or, some state school or something like that. And saw, okay, does that correlate to being a good engineer or an engineer, a good contributor at a company? Lots of other stuff, lots of other metrics. The number one metric that they found, and this was at Stack Overflow, very popular website where they did this survey. Number one metric that they found that correlates to a very good employee, one that would contribute a lot, is whether that person on their own started and completed a class. Started and completed a class. It shows initiative. It shows the ability to learn. It shows that you're not part of the fiat system. So I've given you a layout. Go do this book. Go contribute to open source, and go to meetups and meet some people 7 or 8 times. At that point, I think you'll be in a good position to find a job. Does that answer your question?
I'll try. Thank you.
시간이 다 됐으니까 질문은 여기서 마치도록 하고요. 또 식사 준비되어 식사하시면 되겠고, 마지막으로 다시 한번 지미께 박수 부탁드릴게요. 미드업은 여기서 마치도록 하고요. 또 다음 달에 또 준비되어 있으니까 다음 달에도 많은 참석 부탁드릴게요. 감사합니다. Thank you very much.